Hello folks, what's up? Nice to be on another recording of Send It. My lovely co-host here, Wajat, is in the house. And today we have a very exciting guest, honestly, a project that I'm very curious about and was actually... I became aware of this project, I think, over a year and a half ago, but I think that they have such big aspirations that it's going to take me a while to still figure out how they are able to even do it or achieve it. And I'm talking about LandX. We are very excited to have Kyle from LandX on with us today. I'm sorry, I don't know wherever you are in the world or right now. What's up, Kyle? What's up, guys?
Hey, really glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about LandX today.
For sure, really honored. We usually really like to ask our guests, like, how did you even start with crypto? Like, how long have you been involved in the industry? What did you do before? How did you even get to where you are? And from there, maybe we can take it to how did you come to work with LandX? And then we can start talking about what LandX really is and what it's trying to do.
Yeah, sure. So just to try and keep it short, it was 2017. I started investing a little bit in Ethereum, but I didn't really get into the tech or deep dive into anything regarding educating myself in cryptocurrency. It was just something that I did. I honestly can't remember where I heard about it. It was probably a friend of mine online or something like that. But I invested in Ethereum in 2017. Didn't really think much about it. Made several at the time, pretty small investments. And then I guess it was probably about 2019, it was probably 2019. One of my friends, at the time I was a firefighter and we were getting ready in the morning for our shift. And he asked me about the price of Ethereum. And honestly, it had been probably 6 or 8 months since I had even thought about it. He told me that the price jumped pretty significantly, and so I checked, and obviously my initial investment had gone up quite a bit, so that renewed my interest, and from that point on, I became interested in much more than just speculation in crypto and started researching projects and deep diving into the projects that were showing up on news, capturing headlines, things like that. So yeah, that's how I got interested in the first place. And then actually did some throughout my journey in crypto, got involved in several communities, one of which was an NFT community, Neo Tokyo, and in that community I started connecting with some industry professionals, and since I had been so adamant about doing my own research, I actually jumped at an opportunity to do some research for a venture capital arm that's associated with Neo Tokyo and got in there. One of the projects we researched was LandX, and this was well over a year ago now. And so, yeah, I got in, did a lot of research, connected with the team, got really involved in the community, and then following that experience, we developed a relationship I did with the founders, and yeah, I onboarded, and I've never looked back. So it's been a pretty wild ride.
That's actually cool. By the way, what was the price of ETH about what you were mentioning? Did it go up from what to what?
I honestly don't remember the price of the token because at that time I wasn't monitoring it so closely, but it was a 20x on my part. That's what I remember. Wow. I remember my total investment amount and the gain. So it was, it didn't make me able to instantly retire, but it was a very nice payday.
Yeah, but it made sure that you get the surreal vibe of crypto investing when it goes the way we want to.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't give me the negative, but it definitely gave me a little taste of the positive for sure.
So Kyle, what actually made you, in your mind, attracted to LandX? Like, what about it really made you probably curious and excited about it to actually want to get involved? And maybe by telling it, maybe you can also share with us what LandX actually is and what they're actually trying to do. Because I think what they're trying to do is very uncommon within our industry, at least in this point. Maybe in a few years we'll see some more projects doing some similar things, at least in a way. but I think that right now it is a very special project in the current landscape of the industry.
Yeah, sure. So as I said, I was heavily involved in research, and I was doing some freelance research or contract-based research at the time. So I was just very deeply involved in research. So I saw a lot of projects, and quickly, especially during that time period where, following DeFi summer, we saw all these DeFi projects launching and offering these insane APRs of thousands of percent, right? But it all comes back to where's that APR coming from? And the answer, unfortunately, in most of those cases was just an endlessly inflationary tokenomics model, right? They're going to subsidize the APRs with endless tokens. So they're just putting them out there and diluting the supply. And, we all know what eventually happens if that strategy is deployed. So I quickly started narrowing my scope to what we now see trending as a real yield, right? So one of the questions, I worked at another place on a newsletter, and my partner and I would publish a DeFi yield report every month. And in our internal meetings, we would always just ask ourselves as a qualifying question, well, where does this come from? And you would be shocked at the amount of times that question either couldn't be answered or it was inflationary tokenomics. So we quickly both realized that, if there is going to be an attractive APR, it has to come from somewhere sustainable and it has to come from somewhere real. So that led me into investigating real world assets, the RWA trend that we see now. And from there, that's when I discovered LandX. But this trend is obviously everywhere on social media. So it's all over Crypto X. Is that what we're calling it now? Or is it still Crypto Twitter? But so sourcing yields that DeFi protocols provide has to come from, like I said, a sustainable place. And when you look at real world assets, you can get those sustainable yields in traditional financial realms, right? People do it all the time with bonds, with government debt, with government paper. A lot of major treasuries heavily invest in these areas as sources of reliable, sustainable yield, right? And then you also have protocols like synthetics that are linking cryptocurrency with some other real world asset classes, basically just bringing them on chain. So they're not reinventing the wheel, right? They're not advertising a 7,000% APR by just pushing endless amounts of tokens. They're just taking something that is already proven to work and has been around for decades and bringing it on chain to make it more efficient, to make it more secure, more transparent. And that's exactly what LandX is doing, but instead of doing it for commodities like gold, precious metals, oil, government debt, things like that, we're doing it for agricultural commodities, right? So cereal grains and soybeans, more specifically. So when I deep dived into the project, first off, it checked that box. Where's the yield coming from if I invest in this project? Well, it's coming from the crops that real world farmers produce. It's not coming from an inflationary tokenomics model. It's coming from something in the real world. So that checked the first box. And then I also noticed that the competitive landscape for agricultural commodities was wide open. At the time, it was just completely wide open. Still is, nearly. I mean, we have obviously LandX in the middle of our public and private sale stages, and so we're capturing that market share. But at the time, nobody was doing it. And agricultural commodities, although notoriously unexciting to the crypto investor because we're all here for the volatility, right? Are trillions of dollars change hands all over the world in agricultural commodities. If all you have to do is look at the news and you'll see information about the Black Sea grain deal falling through and that the impact there on wheat prices in Eastern Europe with the conflict that's going over in Ukraine right now. Or you look at the ban on non-basmati white rice that India levied on its its domestic population in order to try and keep prices reasonable for their people, which is understandable, but nonetheless. So it's an incredibly deep in asset class. And so those two things combined, just knowing where the yield was coming from, it making sense, good tokenomics, and the competitive landscape being absolutely wide open, it was a no-brainer for me at the time to invest in LandX, and I was really excited to become part of the team and see this project go from ideation to fruition and bring us to where we are right now.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen to date that a project within the industry is trying to take is what LandX is trying to do, because just like you mentioned, most people, they don't even give it one thought a week, but our whole world runs on this kind of stuff, on how we actually get all the agricultural products to everyone, and to simply make sure that what we see in the Western world, at least thankfully, is obvious, that we're able to eat and have whatever we want to for ourselves, is a whole challenge within itself, and a whole world within itself. And I definitely think that honestly, one of the most ambitious endeavors that I've witnessed so far in crypto. If you can sum it up maybe in a few words or in a key point, what LandX, what is actually LandX? What is LandX trying to actually do? Like in the most direct and simplistic way that you can describe it. If you really need to explain to someone what LandX is with the minimum amount of information.
Sure, yeah. So the elevator pitch is this, right? You have farmers all over the world who do not have access to financial institutions. They need to borrow money either to expand their operations or move their farms in a different direction. So you have this group of farmers that need access to lending. And then on the other side of that, you have crypto native investors, meaning investors that are only exposed to cryptocurrency, who do not have access to traditional commodities markets. So ideally, and what we've seen is this demographic is made up of treasury managers and DAOs and things like that. So you have these two people on each side. You have the farmers who need lending. On the other side, you have investors who need exposure to agricultural commodities. LandX brings those two together, and we bridge that gap. So investors can get exposure to the crops that farmers produce, and farmers can get lending when they otherwise would not be able to. That's the long and short of it. The investors obviously get access to recurring yield from the crops that farmers produce, while farmers get lending on fair terms through secured loans for what they need to expand their operation.
Could you talk us through the actual tokenization part? As in, how are these farmers actually getting these tokenized wheat, corn, rice, etc.? How are they actually getting them on chain?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. First and foremost, we utilize Chainlink to link the price of their commodities that they're producing with real world commodity prices that are sourced from the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So everything's transparent and comes from incredibly reputable sources there. But to address your question directly regarding how these items get on chain, we have basically three different parties in the LandX ecosystem. Like I said, we have the farmers who need lending, we have the investors who want exposure to the commodities, but in the middle, we have validators, and that's not in the traditional sense like an Ethereum validator or nodes or anything like that, but what they do is they facilitate the interaction between LandX and the farmer. So these validators are people around the world who are already involved in their local farming community. So these could be farmer cooperative representatives, farmer union delegates, anything like that. And when we engage with the farmer, we do so through that validator. The validator is a known party already to the farmer in the vast majority of cases, and they handle the tokenization process. So once a contract is signed with a farmer for lending terms, they're only allowed to borrow an amount that is a fraction of what we can verify they're able to produce every year, right? So at launch, we're starting off at 10%. It's called a maximum allowable crop share. So let's say if they produce, just for simplicity's sake, 1,000 tons of wheat every year, they're only going to be able to borrow against 10% of that, right? Or only able to borrow as much money as 10% of those crop share payments would cover. So the short answer is it goes through that validator who facilitates the signing of the legal contract. All loans, like I said, are secured through a lien with the farmer's farmland. We do verify the value and the production history of that farmland using the NDVI index, the geospatial imagery, satellite imaging. So we're sure that the vegetation levels are there and the historical vegetation levels are there to make sure that everything's being produced and everything checks out and is able to be vetted. So that's the short answer. If you want to get into the more technical side of it, I'm happy to, but trying to keep it digestible, pieces for any listeners.
So essentially, you've explained there's basically three parties. You've got the farmers themselves, then you've got the validators who are kind of working directly with the farmers, kind of doing the technical stuff with kind of tokenizing these assets, and then you've got the investors who will be able to access these commodities on chain.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So just a little quick sticking point for clarity's sake, X tokens, so we have we have more, but we have three main tokens in the LandX ecosystem. What's going on right now, the public sale stage 1, as we're recording this, it may have rolled over to stage 2 by the time it gets published, but that's LandX, which is our governance token. That token is required by validators to stake for security purposes when bringing new validators on chain. But it also, anybody who holds LNDX and stakes it is entitled to receive a portion of protocol fees. So it comes with the yield, and then it also comes with governance rights, of course, right? Because it's a governance token with some added utility. I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of that question.
No, that was, I didn't ask anything. I was just wondering, can anyone technically become a validator then, as long as you hold the required LandX tokens? Like hypothetically, could I become a validator?
No, there's a pretty stringent application process to achieve validator status. We want to make sure these are, valued, esteemed members of farming communities. So we hold them to that standard.
Okay, and then just going on to the other thing that you just talked about the actual tokenized assets themselves. What are they? Are they ERC20s, and what chain are they kind of based on, etc.?
Sure. Yeah. So that's thank you. That prompted me to remember the other point I was going to talk about. They are ERC20, but whenever a farmer borrows, so then they have to repay a debt, right? And they have to make loan payments. Okay. Those loan payments that they're making are essentially, from the farmer's point of view, that's just the crop. So if they harvest corn, they're making their payments in corn. They're not making their payments in tokens. But what they actually do is work with the validator. And in many cases, for these purposes in this process, validators may have power of attorney, so they can execute and do all of this on the farmer's behalf to streamline, simplify the process for the farmer. But what X tokens are is what people hold. So if a user gets X wheat or X corn, to keep in line with our example, they can stake that X corn and they'll receive a yield. The yield they receive is equal to 1 kilogram of corn per year. Okay, so the X tokens that users are receiving are not tokenized commodities. They're fractionalized ownership of that debt repayment obligation, right? So that's how it gets from holding an X token and staking it to sustainable yield that's linked to a real world commodity. Because if you hold 100 X tokens, you basically hold 100 shares of the obligation a farmer has to turn in 100 or whatever the number is, tons of corn every year. And that's how you get your yield in C tokens, which is the token that's actually directly linked to the commodity in the tokenized form of corn in this example. But yes, it's ERC20. And yeah.
I see. That makes sense. It's pretty exciting, actually, because now there'll be a whole range of kind of new things that you could do. I mean, could you potentially take your tokenized corn and kind of pair it with USDC into a Uniswap pool? Could you put it into a curve pool? Could you use Pendle to trade the yield for how much corn you're going to make in a year?
Right. Yeah.
Lots of really interesting things.
Yeah, so at launch, C tokens, which is the actual tokenized commodities, are going to be redeemable just directly on the LandX DApp for USDC. So if people want to cash out their yield, that's the way they'll do it. But there's no telling. I mean, we all know how it goes as the Legos get stacked in the DeFi sector and derivatives and different instruments pop up. So it'll be exciting to watch. That much is for sure.
Well, one question I'd had actually just on this concept is first of all, like, which countries are these farms going to be located in, and like, are there any specific areas that you're targeting? And secondly, but because of that, how do you handle the currency exchange risk? Kind of, especially if some farms are based in, let's say, countries where the currencies are not so strong, and kind of converting that into USDC. How does that work?
Sure, yeah. So we've been pretty active recently in Central America, and we're also present in some other areas, parts of Europe. To give you the full answer, so as we all know, cryptocurrency in general is an emerging sector. It's a disruptive financial technology, so there are pockets of resistance all over the world, some places more so than others. So eventually, the roadmap may take us to every country in the world. As of right now, we have to let regulatory clarity, guidelines, or the lack thereof dictate where we can operate. So that's the reason that we're not making this offering to residents of the United States, right? Because we all know what's going on with the SEC and kind of the lack of any kind of finality when it comes to a decision about how assets are going to be treated in the cryptocurrency industry. So that's the answer there. We'll be wherever we're needed, which unfortunately is actually all over the world. So when regulation allows, we'll expand pretty much everywhere. And that'll be super exciting when we get that, not just for LandX or RWAs in general, but for the entire cryptocurrency industry. But to talk about your question on the currency, so it's not really that much of an issue, because if a farmer comes and says, "Hey, I need to borrow some money for putting in an irrigation system," let's say they need to borrow 10,000 United States dollars USD. That's going to be the cost of the irrigation system. We look at their historical crop production. We look at the value of their land, and we arrive at a value of their land that we can assign to it, feel comfortable assigning to it. They sign a lien against that land that guarantees they will pay it back. If they do not pay back the loan, then their land will default, and we will take ownership of that land. And then there are a couple of other measures in place that guarantee we will be covered, and LandX investors and users will be covered in the case of a loan default. We actually have a pretty good article about it and an infographic about it called Risks of Default. So it's a talking point, and we recognize it, and we've gone to considerable length to make sure that people have all the information they need to feel comfortable with whatever decision they come to. But if they need $10,000, we look at all of those factors, and if they are acceptable, then we give them the amount. Basically, we give them X tokens, which they then exchange on the open market for the amount. So it uses the current market price of the X tokens that is relevant for their crop. So X corn if they're a corn farmer. They receive that, and then since they're making their loan payments in crops, currency never even comes into the equation, because they have to turn in a certain amount of their harvest every year. They don't have to turn in a certain amount or a certain number of fiat currency, which is actually one of the most appealing points to a lot of farmers, because some farmers, especially in certain areas of the world, have constant exposure to devaluation of their currency or instability of their country's financial systems. So it's actually a major selling point, the differences in currencies, and we've kind of pivoted it into a strength that we can leverage when we're discussing loan terms with farmers who are seeking financing.
That makes me.
I think my question.
Go ahead, Dimoj.
I was just going to quickly ask. Sorry, dear advisor, you can ask the question after. I think my question was just really in regards to correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought like the price of wheat would be different in kind of every single country. And so let's say once the farmer has handed over part of their crop as part of their loan agreement, what actually happens to it? How is it sold, and kind of how does the revenue come back to LandX, if that makes sense?
Yeah, sure. So the universal pricing agent is the CME, the numbers and the Oracle prices that are sourced through Chainlink from CME. So those are going to be the prices at which loans are given and repaid, right? So while they may only have access to local markets, through a validator, they can access a wider market, because, as I said, validators are qualified, and there is a pretty stringent process in place. So we have to make sure that those validators have either access to the necessary infrastructure to get a competitive market value when they sell the crops for the farmer, or I mean, there's a long list, right, of different requirements for validators. But one of those that speaks to your question is that requirement that they can fulfill their obligation to obtain a competitive price, instead of being tucked away somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa where you only have access to local markets and you're being exploited because the price for your wheat is 20% of what it would be in the international world market.
Kyle, I want to go back a bit, maybe just to make sure that we simplify it as much as we can, because honestly, I think that it's a very complex system, not in a bad way, just because it really tries to take such a basic concept from like the usual world, from our everyday lives, like not for most of us, but how the world actually runs. And actually, bring it to a whole new level and create a lot more opportunities by it. So, like Waj said earlier, there are actually like 3 layers within the LandX ecosystem, and of course, correct us if we're wrong. There are the farmers, the validators, and the investors. Can you maybe share, like from your mind or from LandX's point of view, what are the actual benefits that LandX is offering to each of these different sectors by using LandX? Like, for example, why should a farmer consider joining LandX or pushing forward to be a part of it? Why should someone want to become a validator? And like, who are the people who can actually become even a validator? And of course, after that, like for an investor, what kind of new investment opportunities are opened because of a product like LandX? Now, I know it's a bit of a complex question, but it really is because I'm trying for us to like bring some order into it, because, I think your project here is so ambitious in a way that in many ways it's hard to comprehend. So basically what I'm trying to ask with this very long question is, what are the actual benefits for each of the different layers within the LandX ecosystem?
Yeah, that's another excellent question. And you're right. It is very ambitious and it can get complex. Just from my background before joining LandX, I have exposure to a lot of different projects. I'm sure as you guys do, so you can relate, but some are fairly simple and straightforward. LandX is not, right? It takes a lot of moving parts to do the simple task of bringing something on chain in a fair, transparent, and ethical way. But that's what we're doing. So yeah, to answer your question, farmers face a huge problem. There is an incredibly deep funding gap when it comes to agricultural lending all around the world. This is for a couple of different reasons. One is infrastructure. Traditional financial institutions are simply not present in all of the areas that farmers farm, right? Another one is the lack of knowledge. So in the banking industry across the world, and I can't cite the studies that I read with these numbers because it's been quite a while, frankly. But I know in India and in a large swath of Central America, the amount of employees that lending institutions have that have any kind of agricultural training, agricultural lending expertise, or general agricultural knowledge is incredibly low. So if you are lucky enough to be a farmer in one of these areas that has access to a financial institution where you can get a loan, you would go to a bank, let's say, and say, okay, I need to take out a loan. I'm a farmer. I need to buy 2 new tractors. What can you do for me? The bank on the other side doesn't know anything about farming. They don't know anything about tractors. They don't know about irrigation, harvest, weather patterns. They don't know anything about it. So how do they make up for it? They either do one of two things. They refuse the loan outright and say, we can't offer you anything. Or they offer exploitable or exploitative terms, right? There was a study for micro institution lending in Mexico, I think from the 2010s, where the average loan for agricultural lending offered to farmers came with an APR of 51%. So that's obviously incredibly exploitative, right? But they catch these farmers who are desperate to borrow. They can't move forward with production. Let's say you have a tractor breakdown and you simply can't reap your harvest, right? What are your options? You have to get the money from somewhere. If the only place you can get money is from a loan that comes with a 50% APR, that's what you're going to have to do, at least for short-term survivability, right? So it's in incredibly high demand for the farming community around the world. And this is, in 2017, there were something like 570 million farms around the world, according to one of the studies that I've read for research. And I can get these post-show if anybody's curious about the references. But there were over 10% that were smallholder farmers. So they're the exact farmers that are going to be in this situation, right? So the demand for fair lending is universal in the farming world, not necessarily in hyper-developed countries like places in Western Europe and the United States, Canada. Places like that generally have government subsidies for their farmers to remain competitive on the global agricultural scene. But with those exceptions aside, fair lending terms and fair financing is a pretty universal need for farmers. So that's why a farmer would want to engage with LandX. Those are the benefits we offer that crowd. For the validators, they obviously get a share of the loans that they facilitate, the people they onboard, the farmers they onboard. They claim a commission since they are required to stake LNDX to participate as a validator. They also reap the rewards from staking those tokens and getting the yield that's associated with those. But I think honestly, just from a philosophical standpoint, why would someone want to become a validator? Well, like I said, these are people who are involved in their local farming communities. And so if I'm a local farmer in Southeastern Asia, and I see all of my coworkers, these are friends and family members, right? And they're struggling and they aren't able to make ends meet, or they're having to sell parts of their land, and this is ancestral land, right, that's gone through their families for ages, but they just can't make enough money to stay afloat. I would become a validator to help, the people I know, to help my community, to make sure that they can get connected to an international marketplace where their rice harvests are fairly valued. They're not, bought for 10% of their value and then turned around and sold for the profit of a giant conglomerate or, institution or company or something like that. So I think that's a big part of becoming a validator. Yes, it's profitable, but I think more so than that, the people who become validators have an altruistic desire to help their communities around them. That would be my judgment on that, just based on my experience, which is admittedly a narrow scope, and you're going to have different scenarios in every case. And finally, to answer your question about investors, so farmland is obviously very, very valuable. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, everybody is buying up just tons and tons of farmland. The price of farmland has been trending up for decades. The population of the planet continues to rise, and they're not making any more farmland, right? In fact, it's going the other way. Arable land is decreasing and has been for quite a while. So it's just a no-brainer. I mean, it's like I said at the beginning of the show, it's kind of unexciting to the crypto investor, right? Because commodities, especially agricultural commodities, aren't known for their volatility. I mean, they're a hedge against inflation and a hedge and volatility resistant, uncorrelated to other markets. But that's exactly the reason the big boys like institutions and VCs and giant investment firms target agricultural commodities, because they know it's an incredibly valuable part and necessary part of a comprehensive portfolio, a comprehensive investment strategy, right? So I think just the desire for agricultural commodities is very conspicuous to the experienced investor. So, I mean, if a person's portfolio is absolutely full of Shiba Inu, then they might not be too interested in ag commodities. But for those of us who have been around for a while, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's a very attractive asset class to hedge against inflation, of course, because it's outperformed just inflation currencies themselves for years and years. And the lack of volatility is a perfect offset for things like tech stocks or cryptocurrency when markets pump or dump, right? That's just not going to happen with commodities. And it's a recession-resistant asset class, right? And there's been a lot of talk about that over the past, I guess, 6 to 18 months now. So, yeah, and then pairing it just with that constant yield that comes from the farmers' crops that they turn in. And it's not that you just are buying corn and holding it. You're buying repayment obligation that in perpetuity produces a yield of that commodity. So I think there are a lot of reasons for investors to be interested.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think from an investor perspective, I think it's fantastic to have a new kind of option for a new kind of product altogether, really, especially when it comes to on-chain. And I think it's on Arbitrum, if I'm not mistaken, which I think is a great place for DeFi as a whole. So, I mean, even for someone like me, that's definitely something I would be interested in, certainly something that I personally would love the idea of using, especially, once the money blocks and money Legos get built on top of it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, our Arbitrum is great. Even before I was as involved with LandX as I am now, I was a big fan of Arbitrum. I mean, of course, anytime when you get a scaling solution that wins out, it's gonna be the place to be, right? And yeah, I've nothing but good things to say about Arbitrum, at least from my experience. So we're incredibly excited to be involved in that ecosystem and expose ourselves to the crazy things that some of these innovators and disruptives do with the building blocks in that sector.
By the way, did you guys apply for an STIP grant? Did you get something on that angle, or was it too early for you guys?
That's an excellent question. Unfortunately, it's one that I am ill-equipped to answer. So I might be able to connect with the founder after after we conclude the call and get an answer back to you. But yeah, I'm sorry I can't give you the answer there.
That's so good. It gives us a reason to do the second episode, the continuation episode at some point. So it's actually good to be able to find some stuff that you aren't able to say yet. I was also wondering about like, what do you think is, because honestly, I think that, every DeFi project is extremely challenging, in my opinion, especially as someone who's not an actual builder, but someone who just really admires whatever's going on in the industry and just tries to bring some spotlight to things. But I think that to build something that involves the real world in such a direct asset and actually takes like the most basic thing pretty much for a human being, like the food, and really tries to put it on chain, it really creates, I think, a whole lot of challenges. What are, in your mind, some of the biggest challenges that you guys are actually facing? Like, what are the bottlenecks? What's the hardest part in making such a huge venture work? And where do you at this point see the points of most resistance? And maybe how do we as an industry, as people, people who want to see the success of such a magnificent project, how do we maybe are able to facilitate if we can at all?
Yeah, no, you guys got some excellent questions. Like they're the kinds of questions that people get excited to answer. So that's nice. I'd say the bottleneck, one of the biggest ones you actually kind of touched on earlier, and that's that. Well, it's kind of ironic, right? So what could be simpler than planting seeds in the ground, letting it grow, then taking that plant and selling it to somebody, and then they eat it, right? Sounds simple, and it is, but not when it comes to our stage. So I think one of the bottlenecks is the complexity of the project, right? So there are a lot of projects out there that have one token because that's all they need. LandX, obviously, we have a irrefutable justification for every token in our ecosystem, right? So we have LandX, which is the governance that we've talked about, and utility token that is in the public sales stages right now. And then we have the X token, so X wheat, X rice, X soy, X corn, that are fractionalized debt obligations, right, that people can hold. And then what do those X tokens produce? They produce C tokens, which are the actual tokenized on-chain representations of 1 kilogram of an underlying commodity. And then beyond that, right, so we have we have an instrument called X Basket, which is an equally weighted token that has equal amounts of all four of our tokens, right? So wheat, corn, rice, and soy. So that's an index token. If you're looking for diversification and volatility resistance, chances are you're looking at indexes just from an investment standpoint, irrespective of your involvement in LandX, you're looking at indexes. So there's a lot to understand. The questions that you guys have asked, we have 3 different parties. Why does a farmer, how does it work for a farmer? What the heck is a validator if it's not something that's participating to get, block rewards? And then investors. So we have, 3 different parties involved. We have 3/4 different tokens. I think that is kind of a sticking point, right? But secondary to that, regulation is also a problem, right? So legal, we are 100% legally compliant in any jurisdiction in which we operate. We work with our legal systems, with our governments. We're 100% compliant. That has unfortunately been prohibitive in certain areas, like the United States, right? So we basically can't operate in the United States because we can't be compliant with regulation because nobody knows what that is, right? It's just, it will surprise you with a lawsuit if you operate in the United States. So
you're not alone on that front. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think those are probably the biggest challenges that we face, aside from development things that I'm not privy to. I'm as far from a developer as you can get, so there may be some difficulties or some challenges with the technical side of things, but I'm unaware of that. And our development team has been great and hasn't come up against any major issues or anything like that in any of our development or our multiple audits or open sourcing bug bounty programs. So, but from my perspective, those would be the two areas.
Thank you for sharing that. I think, like the advisor said, like it is a really interesting project with quite a lot of complexities, as you just mentioned. And I think it's perhaps one of those things where you just kind of have to take it one step at a time and see how you kind of grow over time. One thing that I just wanted to ask, I know we're running out of time really now, but when can we expect LandX to be live on Mainnet? Or, when can we actually expect everything to be ready to go?
Yeah, sorry, I muted my microphone briefly and had trouble getting it back.
No worries.
So, as I've referenced a couple of times on the call, we are in our stages of the public sale. We've got everything live in our Discord and on our Twitter profile regarding our launch dates. So, we've got a phased launch. So our DEX listing is scheduled for December 14th right now, and that's of course after the conclusion of the final stage of the public sale. So I would start looking for the LandX platform launch around then.
By the way, where should people? I actually want to, if we have time, I want to ask you one small thing as well. Like, in how many countries do you currently operate? Like, how big is it at this point? Like, how many countries? Like, how many active farmers, active validators? Whatever you can share. I don't know how you calculate.
Yeah, that'd be another question that we will have to get to in the next interview, because I'm not the guy who deals directly with onboarding farmers, so that number's always growing. So unfortunately, I couldn't give you a total right now. But just a bit of clarity on that previous point. If anybody's looking to see when the actual LandX DApp is going to be live for investors, that's on December 15th. So.
Oh, that's really soon.
No, very close.
Yeah.
Very close.
Yeah. 10 days.
Awesome.
That's really soon. We should definitely get the episode out on time, so it's so that people can have a chance to act accordingly. Not financial advice, but I do think that there's something very humbling in witnessing teams and builders from around the world who actually try to take on such huge challenges and really build something that hopefully in one day becomes a very meaningful infrastructure for a better future, honestly. So honestly, I first of all want to tell you and the rest of the guys there, and of course to the head of the operation there, Landwalker, which I really enjoyed in the past hearing some interviews of, much respect. We definitely are rooting for you and hoping that you guys are able to just, take us as an industry to the next step. Because I really do think that these kinds of projects that are gonna actually get the RWA's name, like this is real RWA. You know what I mean? In a way, it feels like for the common person, it feels a lot more RWA than something like bonds, if you know what I mean. Because this is something that everyone can relate to, like, I don't know, a cucumber and a tomato. Mm-hmm. It's much simpler, and it's much even clearer to the fact that for us as human beings, this kind of stuff has value, and to see it starting to get interpretations like you guys are doing, and really to I don't know, it's something that I feel is really elevating our industry. I think it's a huge challenge, but I'm very proud to be in an industry that has people like yourselves who are actually trying to take on such a challenge, and I'm definitely rooting for you guys. And by the way, also, just before we wrap up, I want to say that I think another thing that you guys have been doing brilliantly is what you've been doing with the farmers market. Maybe you have a few seconds to talk about it?
Yeah, we'll have to circle back around. That I've got another meeting that actually started a few seconds ago, so I really appreciate the time and everything you guys have had to say. Excellent questions.
Really
Thank you
enjoyed
so
it.
much, Kyle. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Goodbye,
thanks,
man, and
guys.
best of
It's
luck.
been great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
man.
Look forward to speaking with you again. Y'all have a good day.
Amen. Bye, sir.
Bye.
By the way, Wajan, we just add myself here about this farmers market that I've mentioned. This is something that they've started doing, I don't know, probably almost a year ago, but I'm not sure about the date, which is like every Wednesday, they have a Twitter space hosted by Dow Chemist. And LandX is the organization behind it, and they bring and like they create panels with all kinds of discussions. And I think that in that way they've really like been able to grow their community and bring a lot more awareness, both by people who are just curious people like us who want to know about stuff that's happening in the industry, but also from a lot of builders that on that way they got to interact with and to learn about and to make sure that they know about LandX as well. And I honestly think that they did a very good job on that. So I definitely recommend whoever is interested in checking out the farmers market done by them on Twitter, usually every Wednesday. Again, hosted by Dow Chemist. You can, great guy. You can find him on Twitter as well. And honestly, really enjoyed it. I hope we had some more time, because I really actually had a lot more questions I wanted to ask, if
I
I'm
know.
honest, and I'm pretty sure that you had some as well. And I'm pretty sure it's also not the same questions that we both had in mind of continuing on asking. But I do think that at least we got some kind of a general view on this kind of project, which is honestly very different from the projects that we've been talking to so far. Because so far we've only been talking to, and like most projects are within our industry, they're completely DeFi oriented and within the DeFi world, and they're not touching the outer space. And I know that me personally, I'm very curious about those projects who actually want to like bring parts from the other side of the world, like the world that everyone knows, not just the DeFi nerds, and actually bring it on chain and create some new opportunities for all of us. And hope we get to talk to them again at some point, maybe in a few months.
Yeah, I think we should definitely get them on again. I think, just as you said, I've got a ton more questions, especially regarding kind of composability as well. So, yeah, like you said, this is like a completely new world. I mean, the protocols that we've often spoken to on Sendit have been very DeFi heavy, very DeFi orientated. And this is something that's kind of completely, I wouldn't say completely, but it's definitely off that scale.
Yeah.
There's definitely some connections. I mean, it's an Arbitrum protocol.
Yeah.
There's definitely going to be some links here and there, but yeah, I agree. It's completely something different to what we're used to, and we haven't really seen some sort of agriculture-like project come to crypto. It brings a whole new asset class on chain that we can all interact with. So I'm personally very excited, and yeah, it's really interesting. Just 10 days till mainnet launch. So yeah, I will definitely be playing around and having some fun with it there.
Great. Recommend that you guys follow LandX on their Twitter, go on their Discord and ask questions. I wasn't there that much, but a few months ago I was, and they are very responsive. They are very communicative. I definitely recommend you try it out and follow both them
Yeah,
and
both
Kyle.
on Telegram as well. They're very, very active on Discord and Telegram.
Cool. Didn't even know that. And for us, we're from Leviathan with this Send It show. Honestly, we really hope you like it and you find it useful. Feel free to contact us and tell us, what you want to see us, which kind of projects you want us to talk to, what kind of stuff do you want us to ask about or find out about. And pretty much any kind of feedback is very much appreciated. Hope you like it. And Waj, thanks a lot, man. Was really fun as usual to have another interview with you, like hosting another team and interview them with you. And already looking forward for the next one. You and me already know who we're going to hopefully talk to soon, but let's keep it a surprise unless you want to share it already.
No, we'll keep it a surprise. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thanks. Bye, folks.